Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Fear Fighter. I am your host, Shannan Mondor. Today's episode is a continuation of my series, You Are Not the Only One. I was brought forth to do this series because during my healing from my addiction to alcohol, there was so many times that the universe had brought me to silence. And during those times is when I learned so many things about myself, and I was guided. I was guided to talk openly about my past, my abuse, my addiction, and to speak my truth. From those moments of silence is when we learn, we grow, and that is when we are able to teach others and to help others. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Jonathan Lepine. He is an ex-RCMP officer, and he suffers from PTSD. So, Jonathan, welcome to my podcast. How are you today, Jonathan?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad that you're here, Jonathan. One of the first questions that I do need to ask you is, what is an RCMP officer? Because some of our audience members will not know what an RCMP officer is. So if you can please tell us what that is, and then if you can go into your story from there.
Well, first of all, then RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And we are the federal police force for all of Canada. So we are sent out to all corners of Canada to police. So from big cities to small communities all across. And you don't really get a choice in where you're going. You get to pick to some degree, but at the end of the day, they decide for you. And you accept that and you go to your community and police.
So it is a higher ranking than a city police officer, right? That is correct?
Yeah, you're both police officers. We're federal, whereas they're more municipal. So
okay. Okay. No, that sounds good. So would you like to get into your story now of how you were brought into silence and how that totally changed basically your whole entire world?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, when I graduated from Depot, which is in Regina, which is where all the RCMP across Canada are trained, we all go there. You get sent to your community, again, not knowing where you're going. I got sent to a very violent Native American reserve in Alberta. It was, at the time, was the most violent in Canada. And being a recruit and a rookie going into this situation, I guess, is seen. It was eye-opening to say the least. I didn't even realize that places like this existed in Canada. It was the alcohol and drugs that were running rampant, and the violence was just out of control.
But when you say violence, do you mean murder? So you would have seen murder, abuse of all types?
Absolutely. My first murder was my 12th shift, and that was a stabbing where a young man got stabbed to death.
Wow.
And died in our arms, in our hands. So yeah, 12th shift. And the big thing for me at the time was, we didn't have anyone that really, checked on you. Nobody patted you on the back to say, how are you doing? That was kind of wild, right?
And how old were you, Jonathan, when you became an RCMP officer?
I was 28.
28. Okay.
Yeah. So I had already worked in, corrections. I'd already worked in customs at the border. And this was another leg of my law enforcement journey. So, I'd seen quite a bit at this point already. But this posting took it to another level. And it didn't take long for me to start getting the symptoms of PTSD, which I didn't know what was happening.
And what are those symptoms, Jonathan?
I had the biggest one for me that started showing up that I didn't understand was happening was dry heaving. I'd go to work in the morning and I dry heave, and I was like, what in the heck is going on? Like, is it the air? Is it cold? What's going on with me? And I didn't know. hypervigilance where you couldn't sleep. You'd hear a noise and you were just shooting out of bed. Eventually losing interest in anything that I like to do. And there's more, but those were the big ones for me that really eventually made me wonder what's going on, until right around my 2-year mark. I just broke. I was just broken. I'd already been to endless murders, suicides, shootings were daily just about. And we're talking fully automatic machine gun fire from just a small community of 12,000 people, where, anywhere else, we would have had the military called in, and it was just another day for us. And I ended up, after my 2-year mark, taking a short stint, a short break, mental break, because I was just at my breaking point. I was done. And then started to get some help. They did transfer me to another detachment a few miles away, which wasn't much, it helped, but it wasn't as though I was transferred across the country or anything. So I was still seeing the impact of what I was dealing with there. So yeah, the murders, the assaults that should have been or could have been murders, it plays into that, right? And post-traumatic stress is different for everybody. The symptoms are similar, but a car accident for somebody can lead to PTSD. EMTs, are full of PTSD with all the events they're going to. So doctors, nurses, we all have something that's traumatic, right?
Right. Yeah. So how did you find out that you had PTSD? Like, when were you diagnosed for that? How did that all come about?
That happened with my wife. Actually got me some help, got me to see a doctor, and eventually got me in to see Veterans Affairs counselor, and figured out what was going on with me. And it was actually kind of funny, not funny, but my sergeant at the time, when I'd taken those weeks off for a break, had through the grapevine, I found out that was knocking my name and knocking me down. And he was a very decorated soldier, RCMP, a real man's man, and a great guy. He really was. He just didn't understand what was happening. And the weirdest thing was that happens that he started getting the same symptoms I was having, though he'd already been through how much. And he suddenly realized that I wasn't making this up. This wasn't a joke, or me just trying to get a couple weeks off work.
Mm-hmm.
And he eventually, came to me and apologized. And he became a huge advocate for PTSD, for everyone, and a very vocal voice on it. He's not embarrassed to sit there and cry and tell people what happened. And it was interesting, because I know in my heart of hearts that I wasn't lying.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So once you were diagnosed with PTSD, what type of help was available for you? Or how would someone that does have PTSD go about and get help? How does that whole process work?
But depending on your line of work, perhaps, or what you're doing, is the main thing is to go to your doctor and tell them what's happening. Sometimes, depending how serious it is, if medication can help. If you're not looking for medication, with your depression or your anxiety and all that, seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist or counselor and just talking about what's happening and what's going on, and realizing that you're not alone is the biggest thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you've got the support at home, and you have the support from your family and friends that is going to help you, because that is the hardest thing to do when you have this, is to ask for help. That's the last thing you want to do, because you are depressed, you are stressed, you are, that dark cloud over your head. Everyone says, well, just be happy. It's not that simple, right? So the biggest thing for me was talking, facing my fears. There was a time when if I left the house, I had to plan it intricately. If I was going to Walmart, I went to Walmart and I came home. There was no ABC trips after that, because in my brain, all I was thinking was making it home alive. Every time you leave the house, you think you're going to get killed or die. That's wears on a person.
Yes.
And it took years for me to be away from policing before I could stop thinking like that. And I suddenly realized that, oh, I just went from Walmart to Staples. Wow. And then I went home and I was okay, right? And actually, just recently, for the first time in 10 years, I went back to the reserve that I policed and drove through it. And I did really good. I didn't know how it was going to go, but it had been 10 years and I wanted to face that fear finally. And
Good for
nothing
you.
bad happened.
Good for you. So as you were driving through that area, what were your thoughts and feelings?
To be honest, very little. I was shocked.
Okay.
I didn't know what was going to happen, right? And a little bit of reminiscing, you'd see some new things or new buildings or some old buildings that were gone and things that had changed, but um, places you had been or places you had arrested someone, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't all gloom and doom. And the biggest thing I took from it was realizing that the whole area back to me back then was negative. It was, a shithole. It didn't matter if you were within 100 miles of where I policed you. It just felt like hell to me. And this time it didn't. I saw the trees for how nice they looked and
Right.
the valleys I was going through, and I was like, wow, I've come a long way.
Yeah, well, that's a part of accepting your past, which can make you go forward, right? So that's where this is very important. And I know where you're going forward. And so I can see that about you. So what is the biggest thing that you want people to know about PTSD? Because many people don't even know what it is. So how would you like to educate people in that area?
I would like people to know that it gets better. It can get better. It's not all dark clouds and gloom. There was a time when I didn't know what happiness was anymore. I remember looking at people's Facebooks and seeing people having fun and laughing and thinking, what a bunch of fake crap. I'm like, nobody can be that happy. Nobody
Mhm.
can be laughing all the time, right? And
Mhm.
having such a good time. And I just want people to know, I have friends who are still police officers. I want them, and I tell them all the time, if you're in a rough place, get the help you need. Talk to somebody. Find someone that you trust. To hell with what people think. Lots of people don't want to get help because they're scared of that stigma. They're scared of what's gonna, what are people gonna think of me? Well, what would people have thought of me when I was in the ground? Because that's where I was headed. And um, it does get better, but you have to want it. You have to, if you're not capable, because there was a time, don't get me wrong, where I wasn't capable of getting help. Thankfully, I had my wife. So,
Right.
that's where it's important to find those people or find that someone that can help you or guide you or sees that you're not doing maybe as well as you think you are. That was another thing where I just sometimes would think that, wow, I'm doing great. And then 3 months down the road, I'd be like, oh, no, I wasn't doing as well as I thought, because you don't know when it's going to come back or when something's going to trigger you. So, and it takes time. It's not going to be healed over days and weeks, months, even, you know, it took me years to really get through it.
So looking back at when you left the RCMP, how many years has that been? Because I don't think people can really comprehend that it's not days and weeks that you know heal per se.
Yeah.
How many years did it get you to be in a place where you are comfortable with yourself?
Well, I left in 2012. So it's going on 11 years. And, little pieces of me would get fixed slowly. Um, but, when you consider that I hadn't been north in 10 years, and I don't think I was ready 2 years ago.
Hmm.
That kind of tells you something, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there was other things where 5, 6 years on, driving was getting better, where I wasn't thinking about that all the time, or it wasn't all where I was actually thinking about the future. And actually, whereas before I could hardly think day to day for good things, right? Or I'd hear someone planning a trip in a year and a half, thinking, how in the heck can you plan that? You could be dead. That was always on my mind, right? Why would you even bother? Because you're going to be dead. But
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not, and they weren't. But
Right.
that's literally where my brain would go. So yeah, little bits of pieces of me got fixed slowly. I remember my memory was gone. I had almost my memory of my childhood. Even my early adulthood was I had nothing, and slowly I'd be like, oh my god, I just remembered something. It finally came back, or I get a picture in my head, right? So there's so much that makes it up, and yeah, slowly but surely, and you're never going to be the same person, but it does get better, it does improve, but you got
Right.
to want it, and you've got to keep on it. And we've come to that point now where I can tell my wife that the cloud's coming, when I'm going to have a depression coming. I can warn her, because they start to take it on themselves, that what did they do wrong, and it's
Hmm.
not them. Last times it's not them, or whatever it is. And I'll say, I feel it. And so if I'm laying in bed for 2 days, she knows that, okay, he needs a couple days, and he'll probably come out of it. And I do.
So
So
in your moment of silence, that's also where you got to know yourself too. You got to know who you are, because you would have never been able to distinguish when it's coming. So let's extend a little bit more on your time of silence now. So what have you personally learned about who you are, or what the universe has been telling you that you want to bring forth that you can tell other people?
um, just the stigma of PTSD, and to hell with what people think. Take care of number one, right? Yourself, your family, and get through it. The silence, I was able to listen and just sit, because I didn't feel like my voice mattered. And that took a long, long time. Even still, there's times where I can make a comment, perhaps on a post or something, and I'll delete it, because I just didn't, I don't feel that it matters, but it does matter, and you
It does
should
matter.
have. Yeah, it does. And and I'm not a troublemaker by any means, so I don't like to go on and just cause trouble on comments or say anything. But there's times where definitely, you should speak up and say what you're thinking or what you're feeling. And that's by far probably the biggest one, is just finding, number one, what's important to you, and not being scared that if you say something, what's going to happen, because nothing's going to happen.
Mhm.
um, you
So,
have that right.
and where are you now, Jonathan? Where are you now in life?
I'm in a new happy phase of John. I'm really, really excited to say that um, I just got back, I guess, back into the film industry. Um, and I filmed a movie. I worked on a movie in November and December that will be
What is the name
released.
of the movie?
It's called Dark Match. It will be released in the fall of 2023.
So
It's a
Dark
horror
Matter.
movie, Dark Match, yeah. And that's something that came from over 20 years ago. I did extra work, background acting, as on 3 movies when I worked in Drumheller, and I loved it. I just loved it. And over the years, of course, kids and life and work get in the way, and now my kids are growing up, and I follow a lot of pages for movies in Calgary and Alberta and Edmonton, and this opportunity came up, and I had no clue what I was supposed to do, and I applied, went through the process, and I got a role. And it's kind of funny now, because since that happened, I've learned actually a lot more really quickly, and it's just crazy that I even got the part, seeing all the mistakes that I technically made, that they're saying, this is the way to do it. And I'm like, that's not what I did, but it worked. So, you know, um, which was great because if I had known lots of these things, I don't think I would have done it. But
So
what the heck, right?
what is the movie about? And I want to know, what character do you play in the movie?
It is a horror film. It's a wrestling movie. I play the character Thick. That's his name. We're thick and thin. We're a tag team wrestling team, and we're part of a whole wrestling troupe that get invited to a small town to do a show, and we quickly realize something's not right here, and things go down. Basically, death,
Death.
which was
Lots of death, blood, and gore. Is that what you're saying?
which was kind of interesting to see how I was going to deal with that too, right?
Oh, so I just realized you went through that to get your PTSD, and now you're in a movie. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but I think make believe is a big difference when you're on camera and you're getting actual in front of the camera and doing that. So absolutely amazing. If I can say anything is people tell people, go after your dreams, just do it. And if I hadn't tried, no one was going to give this to me. So now I've got a good agent in Calgary, and I'm hoping to score some more this year. So
that's excellent. So it's going to come out in what did you say, 2023?
Yeah, in the fall.
And where will we be able to watch it? Do you know that yet? Is it going to be on Netflix or movie theaters? Where does it go from there?
It should be in theaters. We're hoping for a small theatrical release. We don't know what the feedback is 100% yet, but it's looking good. So it should be in some theaters, and it will be definitely on streaming services. Which ones we don't know who will pick it up just yet, but it's coming. If you look for it, probably around September, October, around that Halloween time.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to be looking for that movie. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting stuff. So
what does your future entail? You want to be a movie star now, or an actor, and that's where you want to go?
That's what I'm doing. Yeah. I know in my heart of hearts, I've wanted to do this for over 20 years. And after this experience that I had on set with all the other actors and all the crew, the cast, it was just amazing. It was just in my happy place. It didn't matter if it was we had 12, 13-hour days. It didn't matter because time just was irrelevant. And there's that where, I couldn't even imagine, I'm sitting there every day looking around thinking, how did this happen? I can't believe I'm here, right? So, yeah.
That's just amazing. That is so amazing. And now you're doing what you've always wanted to do. And sometimes you have to go through the really hard things, and you've learned a lot through that whole process. And now you are a potential actor. Congratulations, Jonathan. Good for you. I'm proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you know what? Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast, Fear Fighter. So many people are going to listen to this, and they're going to really realize that PTSD is something that is extremely, extremely important for people to understand, that it is a mental illness and it affects so many people out there. So I want to thank you for sharing your story. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
All right.